Mr. Redden, is there anything you want to say on your own behalf before I pronounce sentence?
So basically, I would like to tell the courts, everyone here, like, based on my criminal history, like, I feel that, like, I shouldn't be, like, sent to prison for a second time.
Have you looked at your criminal history? Have you looked at your criminal history?
I actually just, I looked at it.
I mean, you lived it, I
I
suppose.
just looked at it,
Yeah.
Debora Redden's courtroom attack on Judge Carroll Ross in 2004 became a turning point in discussions about courtroom security and mental health in family law cases. Redden had been embroiled in a bitter custody battle that had taken a severe toll on her emotions. As the judge handed down his decision, awarding custody of her children to her ex-husband, Redden, unable to control her fury, suddenly hurled a metal object toward the bench. The projectile struck the judge, causing him to collapse to the floor and sending the room into chaos. Security rushed in to restrain her as she continued to scream insults at the judge, claiming that he had been unfair and biased.
Yeah, but I think it's time that you get a taste of something else because I just can't with that history. In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada, this court...
Her attack was seen as a desperate, albeit misguided attempt to regain control over a situation that had spiraled beyond her reach. The emotional trauma from the custody dispute had clearly overwhelmed her, and the violence reflected her inability to cope with the outcome. Redden's outburst was compounded by the feeling of powerlessness she had been experiencing in the court system, a feeling that many parents, especially those involved in high-stakes custody battles, often experience. Her violence was rooted in emotional turmoil, a breakdown of both personal and legal boundaries.
Mr. Almasi's here now.
Morning, Judge.
Good morning. All right, this is on for the continuation of Mr. Redden's sentencing. When we were last here, arguments were concluded and the court had begun to pronounce sentence when an incident occurred, an incident initiated by Mr. Redden, preventing the court from completing sentencing. That is the sole purpose for today's hearing. Any other issues that may arise from the events that occurred last Wednesday will be handled at a future date by a different court. For purposes of the record, I want to make it clear that I am not changing or modifying the sentence I was in the process of imposing last week before I was interrupted by defendant's actions. I am making my calendar page from that day an exhibit for the court as it existed the moment I walked in. Prior to anything happening, nothing's been changed, indicating the sentence I intended to impose. I'll agree with that for a moment. All right, that being said, in accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada,
The incident raised important questions about the lack of mental health resources for individuals facing emotionally intense situations. Experts in family law and psychology highlighted that while the court system was designed to provide justice, it often failed to address the underlying emotional and psychological issues that people bring into the courtroom. Redden's actions made it painfully clear that more needs to be done to support individuals who are emotionally vulnerable during legal proceedings. The attack not only changed the trajectory of Redden's life, earning her additional charges, but it also served as a grim reminder of the devastating effects that unresolved emotional struggles can have on a person's ability to maintain composure in a high-pressure environment like a courtroom.
Our personal life is
No.
your business.
In 2014, Melissa Hardwick's explosive outburst in Judge Jerry Baxter's courtroom during her sentencing shocked everyone present. Hardwick had been convicted of brutally abusing her stepchildren, and as the judge read her sentence, the weight of her actions seemed to crush her. She had been under scrutiny throughout the trial, and the defense she presented had failed to mitigate her actions. As the sentence was handed down, Hardwick suddenly stood up, her face red with anger and humiliation. She lunged at the judge, shouting obscenities and accusations of injustice. It was clear from her reaction that she had not fully come to terms with the brutality of her own actions.
This court haven't done anything to him.
She'll be arrested for contempt of
It doesn't
court.
make any difference.
You will serve 10 days for contempt.
Hardwick's behavior was driven by a deep-seated sense of guilt, but also anger. For her, the trial wasn't just about the crimes she had committed, but about the perceived injustice she felt throughout the entire process. As the deputies tackled her to the floor, she continued to scream about how the legal system had failed her. Her violent outburst was not only an act of defiance against the judge, but a manifestation of her own internal struggle with shame and remorse. The courtroom, a place designed to deliver justice, was suddenly transformed into a battleground of raw emotion and uncontrollable rage.
Go now.
Get off of me!
Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
We hear her yelling and flapping around on the ground.
This event brought to light how the legal system often overlooks the mental health of defendants who have committed emotionally charged crimes. Hardwick's case underscored the need for greater psychological support and mental health evaluations for individuals who might react violently when confronted with the full scope of their actions. Legal professionals and psychologists alike argued that preventative measures, such as providing better emotional support to defendants in high-stress cases like Hardwick's, could potentially reduce the likelihood of such outbursts. In Hardwick's case, her attack on the judge was a tragic culmination of her inability to face the consequences of her actions. The incident served as a wake-up call for both the public and the legal community about the complexities of human emotion and its potential to break free in the most unexpected and dangerous ways.
Charged with her murder, he's already serving a 50-year sentence for killing his ex-girlfriend, Bria Runowitz, in Harrison County while her children were in the home. Today he came into the courtroom with tattoos that read "Kill Rats" and "Those That Must Die" above a list that included all judges, prosecutors, cops, the media, 3 rats that had been crossed out, and many more. The tattoo...
In 2009, Bass Webb's violent spitting incident in Judge Tamara Gormley's courtroom left a lasting mark on the justice system. Webb, a repeat offender with a violent criminal history, had no respect for the authority of the court. As his trial neared its conclusion, the judge began reading the verdict and Webb's anger seemed to boil over. Without warning, he stood up from the defendant's chair, sneering at the judge in the gallery. Then, in an act of open defiance, Webb spat directly in Judge Gormley's face. The courtroom froze for a moment, and then chaos erupted. Webb continued to shout obscenities as security rushed to restrain him. He fought back, kicking and screaming as the courtroom descended into confusion and panic.
Judge Dixon then informed Webb she's recusing herself from the trial because she knew the 2 jail employees he targeted with his vehicle.
There's no way I'm going to try this case or have any further proceedings, or I have to see you for one further second.
Webb's attack wasn't just a random outburst, it was a deliberate act of aggression that demonstrated his utter contempt for the judicial system. For Webb, the courtroom was not a place where justice was dispensed, but a space of power struggles. His act of spitting was more than just a physical assault. It was a symbolic act of rebellion, designed to strip away the authority of the court and show that he would not be humbled by the system. In many ways, Webb's behavior echoed the sentiments of many defendants who feel powerless and trapped by their circumstances, but with a dangerous twist. His violent act exposed the deep-rooted disdain he held for the institution that was holding him accountable for his actions.
Watch again. as Webb literally spit on the judge. But this incident is far from the last time Bass Webb will spit in the face of the law.
Following the incident, legal experts discussed the implications of Webb's attack, focusing on the breakdown of control in such volatile cases. Webb's actions prompted a re-evaluation of courtroom security protocols. Some suggested that more resources should be devoted to ensuring the safety of judges and others in the courtroom, especially in cases involving violent offenders. Additionally, the attack sparked further dialogue about the psychological state of defendants who engage in such behavior. Webb's attack on the judge demonstrated how unchecked anger and resentment can manifest in violence, making it critical for courts to offer better mental health support for individuals caught in the justice system. Joseph Zeeler's violent courtroom outburst during his sentencing in 2023 stunned everyone present. Zeeler, a serial killer who had evaded capture for years, finally found himself in the spotlight after his arrest. As he was about to receive his sentence, Zeeler suddenly lashed out, elbowing his own defense attorney in the face during the proceedings. The courtroom was thrown into chaos, with deputies rushing to subdue him and his attorney stumbling back in shock. The attack was a moment of pure violence, and it revealed much about Zeeler's psyche and his contempt for the justice system that had finally caught up with him.
What's that?
Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Relax. Don't cough. Relax.
I used to box. I've taken a lot better shots than that.
Yeah, well, relax. Listen, I ain't doing nothing to you.
Zeeler's violent outburst seemed to be a manifestation of his years of evading responsibility for his crimes. Throughout the trial, he had remained composed, almost aloof, but the realization that his freedom was at an end seemed to trigger a violent response. Some experts argued that Zeeler's actions were an expression of his inability to control his rage after spending so many years manipulating the system. His attack on his attorney, who had been defending him in court, only added to the sense of chaos that surrounded his case. It was clear that Zeeler was a man who, despite his years of calculated evasion, was deeply disturbed and incapable of accepting the consequences of his actions. Following the attack, discussions centered on how to handle individuals like Zeeler, who have a history of violence and manipulation. Experts in criminal psychology suggested that Zeeler's outburst was not just a knee-jerk reaction, but part of a deeper pattern of behavior rooted in narcissism and psychopathy. The case also raised questions about the ability of defense attorneys to protect themselves and manage highly volatile defendants. For Zeeler, the violence was a final act of defiance, but it was also a sign of the deep psychological fractures that had shaped his criminal behavior for years.
First, we head to Seattle, Washington, and the King County Courtroom.
This is State of Washington versus Christopher Teal, cause number 181008391, Seattle designation.
Christopher Teal's attack on Judge Richard Walters in 2010 is a grim example of how volatile defendants can disrupt a courtroom. Teal had been convicted of several violent crimes and was facing sentencing when his frustration reached a boiling point. As Judge Walters read the verdict, Teal suddenly leapt from his seat, knocking over the defense table in his haste. He rushed toward the bench, shouting curses and attempting to strike the judge. Security rushed in, tackling him to the ground as deputies struggled to subdue the increasingly violent defendant.
The defendant's in court for a competency hearing to determine whether he's fit to stand trial. Standing next to him is Reed Birkland, his court-appointed attorney. The jail guard removes Teal's cuffs.
I'm Emily Peterson on behalf.
Teal's outburst was not just a random act of violence, but a deliberate attack on the judicial system that had condemned him. Legal professionals noted that Teal had shown little remorse for his actions during the trial, often acting as if the legal system had no power over him. His attack on the judge was a final act of rebellion, an attempt to reclaim the control he had lost during the trial. As deputies restrained him, Teal continued to yell, and his fury reverberated throughout the courtroom. The attack served as a stark reminder of how some individuals, when faced with the consequences of their actions, can react violently out of a sense of entitlement or resentment.
He's represented by counsel, Mr. Berkland.
He raises his arm toward Berkland, but extra security's at the ready.
My understanding from his counsel, who I'll defer to in a moment.
Without provocation, Teal punches his own attorney.
Face down! Face down! Put your hand behind your back!
The guards immediately pounce on the 6'3" defendant and take him to the ground. Teal's attorney looks to be unhurt.
Following the attack, legal experts discussed how to handle defendants like Teal, who show little regard for the court and its authority. Some suggested that more intensive psychological evaluations could help identify individuals who might lash out in such a way. Others called for improved security measures in the courtroom, especially when dealing with repeat offenders like Teal. His violent behavior demonstrated how easily a courtroom can descend into chaos if not properly managed, and how vulnerable both judges and attorneys are in such high-stakes situations.
First up, we're in Pike County Justice Court in Pike, Mississippi. Sidney Newsom, who's handcuffed and shackled, is in front of Southern District Judge Aubrey Rimes. He's facing a domestic violence charge. After reviewing some paperwork and doing a little dance, he appears relatively calm. But when the transport officer taps on the table, Newsom seems to get agitated. Then his mother and brother enter the courtroom. He steps towards them briefly, but the officer motions him back in line again. Judge Rimes then signals the family members to take seats.
Sidney Newsom's violent outburst in 2016 during his trial for a series of violent crimes shocked both the courtroom and the public. Newsom, a known repeat offender, had been on trial for armed robbery, assault, and other charges. Throughout the trial, he had shown little remorse for his actions, often making crude remarks about the victims and the judicial process. As his sentencing was being read by Judge Alan Stone, Newsom, who had been sitting calmly up until that moment, suddenly stood up and lunged toward the bench.
Newsom signs the paperwork and the officer then hands the documents to Judge Rimes. The defendant, however, doesn't seem ready to rest his case. An irate Newsom argues with the judge, who quickly motions for his removal from court. But Newsom decides against exiting just yet. As the officer tries to direct him back toward the door, Newsom loses it. First, he grabs a stack of papers from the desk and throws them at the judge. As papers fly everywhere, two court clerks rush away from the commotion, while Newsom's mother reacts. The transport officer wrestles the defendant to the ground for a few moments, but he overpowers her. He then grabs a telephone and hurls it at the judge, toppling a computer monitor in the process. Judge Rimes has seen enough and decides to take control. As Newsom...
His outburst came without warning. Newsom charged at the judge with an intense fury in his eyes, shouting that the system had failed him and that he was being punished unfairly. The courtroom erupted in chaos as deputies rushed to restrain him, but not before he managed to land a punch to Judge Stone's face. The impact sent the judge stumbling backward, and for a moment, it seemed as though the courtroom might descend into full-blown violence. Newsom's anger seemed to have no bounds as he struggled with the deputies, continuing to scream obscenities.
Throws more paper at him, Judge Rimes single-handedly pins him onto the desk. The defendant's brother then gets involved as well, though it's unclear whether he's trying to assist the judge. Eventually, 4 more transport officials stream into the court. One of them finally leads Newsom out of the room, Judge Rhymes returns to the bench, leans back in his chair while one court clerk puts the computer monitor back in place and another straightens up the scattered paper. As the defendant's brother is removed from the court, Rhymes returns to business. The brother was not charged with any crime.
The courtroom was left in stunned silence after the deputies finally managed to restrain him. Newsom's attack not only put the judge in physical harm's way, but also undermined the sanctity of the judicial process. The act of violence wasn't just a personal attack on the judge, it was a broader statement against the legal system that had caught up with him. For Newsom, it appeared that the court was just another institution to be defied and rejected. His uncontrollable outburst signified his deep resentment and anger at being held accountable for his actions.